Amboseli Reserve, early morning. A female elephant stood motionless in the center of the road, her wide frame casting a long shadow across the cooling tar. Her ears hung still, not fanned in agitation. Her trunk barely moved. A convoy of vehicles idled 50 meters back, tourists silent behind windows, unsure if they were witnessing a standoff or something far more unusual. Dust curled around her legs, but she did not shift. She was not blocking out aggression. She was waiting. Miriam arrived minutes later, stepping from her vehicle with quiet purpose. She was the senior ranger for this stretch, and she had seen elephants halt traffic before. But this one held herself differently. Not defensive, not frightened. She was rooted, the kind of stillness that had intention behind it. Miriam raised a hand gently to pause the trailing vehicle, then moved forward a few steps and crouched by the road's edge, watching. The elephant did not react. Her gaze was fixed, not on the people or the jeeps, but on something far beyond them, where the scrub dipped into low ground. The matriarch's skin was scored with age, and her left tusk was cracked near the tip. Flies circled the folds of her ears, but she didn't swat them away. Her weight was centered, balanced, but heavy. Miriam knew that elephants rarely longer without cause. A traveler might pause, might shift or test the wind, but this was a stand. Something was off. She reached for her field binoculars and scanned the surrounding terrain. Dry grass, thorn bush, distant fig trees. Nothing moved. After 20 minutes, another ranger, Lacan, joined her. They kept their voices low, movement even. "Why here?" he asked softly. Miriam shook her head once. She's not in pain, not trapped, but she hasn't blinked once. It was true. The elephant's stillness felt less like defiance and more like tension, the way an animal waits for a signal. Miriam noted a slight sway in her knees, as if resisting the urge to move. There was no sign of a calf. A pair of oxpeckers shifted on her back, unsettled. A slow gust of wind pulled dust across the road. The elephant shifted her front foot once, then stopped again. The sound of the engines in the distance, still idling, pressed against the silence. Miriam stepped back and walked the shoulder of the road for 30 meters, watching the elephant's eyes follow her. But still, she didn't move. Her ears lifted once as if to listen, then dropped again. The message was quiet, but clear. She was waiting for something. Miriam had seen mother elephants who lost calves return to places of grief, but this didn't feel like mourning. It felt like an expectation. She returned to Lacan. "We need to search the nearby brush," she said plainly. "If there's a calf, it's not here." The stakes were immediate now. If a young elephant was injured or trapped in the area, time mattered. If the mother stayed here, exposed and unmoving, her risk of dehydration or confusion increased by the hour. And if she did decide to move suddenly, toward the vehicles or into the bush, the situation could shift quickly. They radioed for a support team to help scan the low ground just beyond the bend. Lacan took the southern side, Miriam the northern edge, walking parallel to the road but keeping within sight of the matriarch. The elephant tracked them both with slow movements of her head. She didn't charge, she didn't trumpet, she simply waited. And that was the strangest part. When the sun lifted another hand's width above the plains, she finally made a sound. A low, rolling rumble that seemed to vibrate the dust. It was not a call of alarm. It was not a warning. It was something older. Miriam felt it more than heard it. She paused mid-step, letting the silence return around her. Nothing moved in the brush. Not yet. The matriarch stayed on the tar, unmoving, the heat building gently around her. The world waited with her. Miriam stepped carefully along the northern edge of the road, eyes low to the ground. The elephant had not followed, not even turned her head. But Miriam felt her presence behind her like a quiet weight. The dust near the verge held the faint remains of tracks, not fresh, not clear, but enough to suggest movement. One set was smaller. calf size, intermittent, broken. A few meters in, the prints turned uneven, and a single drag mark pulled away into the brush. She paused and signaled to Lekin, who had taken the opposite side. He joined her without a word, crouching where the mark began. It was subtle, not torn earth or a deep rut, but a slight disruption in the top layer of dust, like something had been pulled. They followed it together, boots brushing against dry stalks of grass. The wind had softened most edges, but the shape was consistent. Something had moved here, slowly, then stopped. Further in, they found a clear impression of a small body, where it had lain down or collapsed. One side of the imprint was deeper than the other. Miriam knelt beside it, fingertips grazing the edge of the mark. Nearby, a twisted branch had fresh scuff marks along its underside, and short hairs caught on the bark. Elephant calf. Likely young, possibly injured. The trail beyond the impression was faint, suggesting little or no further movement. The rangers spread out gently, each moving in a curve around the last known position. A few meters ahead, Lacan called softly, "Over here." Miriam joined him, finding another set of shallow prints, half as deep as they should have been. Hesitant, faltering. If the calf had moved beyond this point, it was with difficulty. No other large animal signs were nearby, no predator prints, no signs of struggle. But there were patches of dung from the mother, and a small drop of pinkish fluid in the grass that caught Miriam's attention. "Could be from the calf," she said, her voice low. "Not fresh, but recent enough." The trail curved again, angling back toward the low trees that bordered the rise beyond the road. The landscape folded into a shallow depression. Shaded, cooler, dense with acacia. It was a good place to hide, or to rest, but not to survive long without help. Miriam felt the shape of the story forming now. The mother had led her calf this way. At some point the calf had fallen behind, and when it couldn't go further, she had returned to the road, waiting where someone might see her, where help might come. It wasn't instinct, not in the usual sense. It was something else, familiar, practiced, perhaps passed down. They moved slowly, spacing themselves in a wide arc, eyes scanning for any flash of movement or shift in shade. The silence was heavier now. Birds called from the far ridge, but here, the brush was quiet. Miriam brushed past a hanging vine and froze, a shallow print beneath a clump of dry ferns, and beside it, a deeper scuff, fresh, damp underneath. "Here," she said, "this is closer." They fanned inward, voices low and careful. If the calf was nearby and alive, too much noise could panic it, and if it was injured, sudden motion could cause more harm. Miriam slowed her steps. The undergrowth thickened slightly and the ground became uneven. Every few meters, she found another sign, a partial hoof, a smear of earth, a flattened patch. Each mark told the same thing. The calf had not moved far. It was likely still here. The question was whether it was alive and whether they could reach it in time. Back on the road, the matriarch had not moved. Her shadow had shifted with the sun, but her feet remained rooted. Miriam glanced toward the rise. "She's watching," she said quietly. "She knows we're close." Lekin nodded once. "If we find the calf, we'll know why she wouldn't leave." They pressed deeper into the brush, the trail pulling them forward like a thin thread in the dust. Every step mattered now. If the calf was alive, it was vulnerable. If it was injured, it would need help soon. And if they reached it, they would have to find a way to bring it back through the same path. Safely, slowly, without panic. The marks had grown clearer. The next few minutes would tell everything. The dust just off the edge of the road held more than footprints. Miriam crouched low, steadying herself with one hand against the packed earth. A small impression, round, soft, but shallow, led forward in a weaving line. Just beside it, a single drag mark cut faintly through the soil, as if something had been pulled or stumbled. The brush here was dry and close to the ground, offering little cover but enough to confuse a distant view. Miriam scanned ahead and rose quietly. "There's something here," she said, voice low but certain. Lacan joined her, stepping with care. He paused over the same mark, then nodded once. "Young," he murmured, "too young to be alone." They didn't need to speak the rest. If this was from a calf, it wasn't moving right. A healthy calf would leave deep, strong tracks. These were hesitant, scattered, sometimes lost entirely in the sand. Miriam took the lead, following the faint trail into the thinning brush. The matriarch behind them hadn't shifted from her place on the tar, but her gaze remained locked in their direction. Not anxious, not aggressive, just fixed. She was watching every movement. The trail curved slowly toward a low dip in the land where the light changed. Softer, less direct. Here the marks became clearer. A set of prints showed the rounded edge of a small foot, splayed slightly as if struggling for balance. Another few feet ahead, a scuffed hollow where something had laid down. Miriam knelt again. In the center of the depression, pressed into the dry grass, was a patch darker than the rest. Not blood, just dampness. Old sweat or fluid, faded but real. She reached out and touched the edge with the back of her hand. Cool, not cold. "They were here," she said softly. "Not long ago." They spread out slightly, maintaining line of sight. Lacan moved ahead, scanning side to side with practiced eyes. Miriam stepped slowly, pausing at every broken twig, every dislodged stone. Each sign confirmed the same story. A calf had moved through here but clumsily, not walking upright for long. And now it was no longer visible. She stopped where the trail ended abruptly near a clump of fever trees. Beyond it, the ground sloped gently downward and vanished into thicker brush. No prints in that direction. She backtracked 2 steps, then angled left, checking for a detour. Nothing. But as she turned to signal Lacan, he raised his hand. "Here," he called, barely above a whisper. She moved quickly but silently toward him. He stood near a thorn bush, pointing downward. A streak in the dirt curved at the end. A tail mark dragged behind. Miriam followed it with her eyes. It disappeared beneath a dense cover of tangled branches, almost invisible unless standing directly above. No movement came from within, no sound, just stillness. Miriam lowered herself and peered into the shaded hollow. Inside, shielded by natural walls of bark and dust, was a deeper depression in the earth, smooth, packed, and rimmed with small scuffs. Hairs clung to the sides. At its center, a few scattered leaves bore tiny spots of darkened fluid. Miriam didn't speak. She stood and took a step back. "It's a resting place," she said to Lacan. "The calf was here. Hurt, maybe hiding, but it moved again. Or was taken." They stood in silence for a moment, the air around them thick with heat and dust. A single bird called from somewhere above, distant and uninterested. Miriam exhaled slowly. "She's not blocking the road," she said at last. "She's waiting for this." She turned and looked back toward the matriarch, whose shape still filled the road like a statue carved in ash. "She brought us here," Miriam added. This was never about the vehicles. The risk was now sharper. If the calf was injured and still close, it needed to be found quickly, before predators picked up its scent. If it had already moved, it might not get far. Either way, they would have to act soon. The mother would not wait forever. The dust beneath their feet still told a story, and it wasn't finished yet. A faint trumpet rose from the acacia thicket, thin, high, and strained. Miriam froze mid-step. The sound didn't echo. It wavered, soft enough to miss, but close enough to make the silence break open. Lacan turned sharply toward the direction of the call, already scanning the ground for a path through. Miriam raised a hand without speaking and moved into the brush, her steps slow, deliberate. The cry had come from within a dense knot of low acacia, thick with thorns and old wood. The trees here grew tight to the ground, their trunks gnarled and low-branching, forming a rough wall that resisted wind and animal alike. Miriam crouched and peered beneath the twisted growth. The light under the canopy was dim, green-tinged. Then she saw it, a shape too still to be wind-blown, too pale to be shadowed. Tucked against the trunk of a fallen log lay a calf, half curled on its side, one leg caught beneath the dead wood. Its ears twitched, but barely. The skin along its side was dry and cracked with dust. A single eye blinked slowly in her direction. It had called out, but now it had no more sound left. She stepped back and called Lacan. Trapped, alive. His pace quickened as he joined her. Together they surveyed the log, thick, old, split, but not soft. It had collapsed from one of the acacias during last season's wind, likely unnoticed until now. The calf must have stumbled beneath it, catching its rear leg as it fell or tried to pass through. From the looks of the scarring and the dry earth beneath, it had been there since sometime the previous day. Time was pressing in now. Miriam moved carefully around the edge of the thicket, seeking a path wide enough to allow a stretcher or at least a straight carry. The surrounding growth pushed in from all sides, but near the northern end, a narrow gap in the underbrush showed promise. "We can cut through here," she said. "Minimal disturbance." Lacan nodded and signaled the rescue team over the radio. 2 more rangers arrived with machetes and stretchers, hands gloved and steps soft. They said little, only what was needed. Every move was measured, every cut small. Inside the thicket, the calf stirred at the first snap of a branch. Not in panic, but confusion. Its trunk lifted weakly, curling once and then falling. It let out another sound, barely a breath, more vibration than voice. Miriam crouched near the opening and whispered, "You're not alone. We're here." It was enough to keep it calm. The team cleared a path, weaving carefully between the strongest trunks. The log had to be moved straight back, not rolled, to avoid further injury. 2 rangers steadied it while a third slid a padded loop around the calf's trapped limb. With a count barely above a murmur, they lifted. The log gave after the second try, shifting just enough. The trapped leg came free, scraped but not broken. The calf did not rise. Its body sagged into the earth, breath shallow but steady. A small cut above the right eye bled slowly, clotting in the dust. Lacan examined the wound, then nodded. No deep breaks, just weakness. Miriam knelt beside it and offered a folded cloth soaked in saline. The calf's trunk brushed it once, then again, finally curling weakly around it. Outside the thicket, the air felt sharper. The matriarch had not moved. Her figure still stood on the road, unmoving, staring in their direction. From this angle, her ears were forward, her body angled not in fear, but in readiness. She knew. She had known the moment they stepped into the bush. Miriam rose and looked back once before signaling to begin the carry. "We bring him to her," she said. "She hasn't come because she's making sure we will." 2 rangers lifted the calf with practiced hands, using a sling to support its weight evenly. Its legs dangled but didn't thrash. The eyes stayed open. As they stepped out of the thorn line and back into the open grass, the sun hit the calf's skin, and it blinked once against the light. Ahead, the road waited. The mother had not moved. Still watching, still trusting. The path was clear now. But the next step mattered more than all that had come before. The calf could not stand. Its legs curled beneath it as the rangers gently lowered it onto a padded field stretcher, fashioned from canvas and bamboo poles. The weak weight of its body sank into the cloth as if claimed by the earth itself. Its breath came shallow and slow, ribs lifting in short waves. Miriam knelt beside it once more, touching the trunk softly with the back of her hand. The calf responded only with a faint flick of its ear. They were losing time. Behind them, the narrow path carved through the acacia was now the only way out, and it led straight into open ground. From the thicket to the road stretched nearly 80 meters of exposed plain. No shade, no cover. The soil here was dry and hard-packed, cracking underfoot. Lacan scanned the edge of the horizon, eyes following every rustle in the grass. This was the hour when shadows lengthened and hyenas started to circle in the far distance. The calf's scent was already in the air, pulled on the slow breeze. "If we stay too long," he said, "they'll find us." Miriam stood. "Then we don't stay." She looked to the matriarch still planted firmly in the road ahead. The elephant had not taken a single step, but her body was no longer relaxed. One front foot shifted. Her head tilted just slightly toward the clearing. She saw them. She saw what they carried, and still she did not come. Whatever had stopped her from entering the thicket, fear of tight spaces, the instinct to not bring predators closer, she was holding that line with unshakable resolve. She would not move, not until the calf came to her. The rangers adjusted their grips, two at the front, two at the back. The calf's legs draped motionless, trunk curled loosely to one side. A wet cloth rested behind its ears, changed every few minutes to keep its body from overheating. Lacan gave a quiet nod. They lifted in unison. The weight was awkward but manageable, more delicate than heavy. The calf did not struggle. It had no strength left to fight. They stepped into the clearing, boots brushing the brittle grass. The light hit them full, and the air felt twice as still. It was the kind of stillness that carried noise far. Hoofsteps, breath, the soft creak of canvas. Miriam walked beside them, scanning every direction. The matriarch ahead remained a silent silhouette against the road's gray. She made no sound, but her ears rose high, alert, listening. The path sloped gently upward. At 20 meters, the heat pressed heavier on their shoulders. At 30, a pair of marabou storks lifted off from a nearby tree, startled by movement. At 40, a ridge of dark grass shifted slightly. Just wind, just grass. But no one looked away. Miriam spoke low, not to the rangers, but to the air between them. Just a little further. The calf shifted once, a low moan rolling from its chest. Miriam glanced back. The eyes were still open, still watching. The sound had not been painful. It was recognition. At 50 meters, the matriarch let out a low, rolling rumble, deep enough to feel in the ribs, quiet enough to carry only a few steps. It was not a call. It was confirmation. She knew her calf was alive. They were close now, the road just ahead. The risk behind them still hung sharp. If a predator had scented the calf, this exposed stretch would give them every advantage. They had to reach the cover of the vehicles before full dusk. Still, they moved with care, not rushing, not stumbling. If they dropped the calf now, even once, the damage could be irreversible. As they stepped onto the edge of the road, the mother finally moved. One pace forward, then another. She did not charge. She did not call out. She only came close enough to see what they carried. Her trunk extended, not reaching yet, but tasting the air. The rangers set the stretcher down slowly on the warm tar. The calf didn't lift its head, but its ears moved. The mother remained just out of reach, watching, always watching. The plain behind them stretched quiet for now, but the wind was changing. They had crossed the open, but the final reunion still held its own weight. The stretcher lifted again, this time onto the flat of the road where the warmth from the tar had softened in the evening light. The calf's legs hung slack, trunk curled in near its chest, the rise and fall of its breathing steady but shallow. Miriam walked at its side, one hand resting gently on the canvas as they began the final approach. The matriarch stood just ahead, broad and unmoving, blocking the center line as if guarding the very air around her. But her posture had changed. Her head was lower now, ears relaxed. The deep tension in her body softened by something else. Recognition. At 15 meters, she took one step forward. The rangers paused. Miriam didn't raise a hand or speak. She only waited. The elephant's second step was slower, deliberate. She veered slightly to the left, leaving space between her and the stretcher, not confronting it but matching its path. As the group moved again, she followed parallel. Her trunk lifted slightly, curling inward, scenting the calf from a distance. She didn't touch. She didn't test. She simply moved with them. The open stretch ahead curved gently toward a pocket of acacia where the shade had deepened with the lowering sun. That was their goal now, a quiet place where the calf could rest beside its mother, where the herd might feel safe enough to come closer. But the distance remained long, and the rangers would have to carry every step. Behind them, the empty road shimmered in the heat. Around them, the bush pressed close but still. The moment held a balance so fine it felt breakable with a breath. The matriarch was no longer blocking. She was guiding. Miriam stepped slightly ahead, clearing the path. The stretcher team moved behind her, their pace even, their silence complete. To their right, the elephant walked with slow, sure steps, not quite touching, not quite apart. A silent flank. When the calf made a small sound, a groan, dry and short, the mother stopped. Her ears rose, her head turned slightly toward the noise. Then she moved again, this time angling closer. Her trunk brushed lightly against the back corner of the stretcher, not pressing, just knowing. The calf didn't lift its head, but one ear flicked. The mother let out a low breath, a soft vibration through the air. The group reached the base of the acacia, and the rangers lowered the stretcher into the tall grass. Miriam stepped back as the mother approached fully. The canvas dipped slightly under her weight as her front foot settled close beside her calf's head. Her trunk moved slowly over the calf's spine, pausing at the small cuts, the bruised skin, the dried blood near the leg. No sound came from her, only touch. Gentle and precise. Lacan moved to the edge of the clearing, keeping watch on the ridges beyond. Nothing stirred, no calls, no shapes in the tall grass. They were alone for now, held in the quiet that came only after a moment of deep uncertainty. The mother circled once around the calf, then stood at its side and stilled. Miriam gave the signal, and the rangers began to retreat, one step at a time, never turning their backs, never rushing. The elephant didn't follow. She didn't watch them leave. Her gaze remained on her calf, who now shifted slightly on the canvas, the trunk extending, brushing blindly into the dust beside it. The mother lowered her own trunk, meeting it there. By the time the rangers reached the edge of the clearing, the two were still touching, not moving, not calling, just joined. The open road behind them bore no trace of what had passed, but the dust carried the scent of trust and the soft prints of a shared crossing. Beneath the wide canopy of a fig tree, where the light broke gently across the grass, the calf lay curled in a hollow of cool dust. The stretcher had been lowered with care. The canvas left beneath its body to prevent further strain. Its eyes remained half-lidded, blinking in slow rhythm, trunk shifting in small arcs as it searched the air. The heat had eased here, filtered through leaves that stirred with the afternoon breeze. Miriam knelt beside the calf, drawing a soft cloth along its side, wiping dust from the shallow abrasions. A ranger opened a hydration pouch and poured a slow trickle of saline into a shallow bowl. Another soaked a strip of cloth and gently dabbed the calf's tongue. There was no resistance, no panic, just exhaustion. The calf's trunk curled faintly around the bowl as water touched its lips. One swallow, then another. Not enough, but more than nothing. Beside it, the mother stood silently, shifting her weight from foot to foot, not out of distress but vigilance. She made no sound, but she circled the clearing once, pausing every few steps to watch the calf's side rise and fall. Lacan kept a watch from the far ridge. He hadn't spoken much since the stretcher crossed the tar. Now he crouched beside the tree's edge, eyes on the pair beneath the fig. Miriam checked the pulse again, slow but strong. The calf's breathing had begun to deepen. Another cloth was soaked, this time in diluted electrolytes. The calf responded with a flick of the ear and a faint groan, deep in the throat. Progress. Fragile, but real. The mother returned to the calf's side, standing over it in a wide, protective arc. Her trunk draped along the calf's back, lifting once to inspect the matted patches of fur, then falling still. Miriam didn't move. Neither did any of the others. The air had stilled with the weight of the moment. One of the younger rangers seated near the base of the tree spoke quietly, more thought than statement. "She never left, because she knew we'd come." No one answered, but the truth of it hung between them. The matriarch had not wandered in search. She had not cried out or charged. She had planted herself where she would be seen and waited. She had chosen a place she could be found, and had not moved until they proved they could be trusted. It was a kind of faith Miriam had seen only a handful of times in her years here. It wasn't instinct, it was a memory passed through generations, a deeper kind of knowing. A breeze moved through the fig leaves, shaking the light across the calf's body. The wounds were minor, abrasions, shallow bruising, slight dehydration. But left alone, even a few more hours, and the calf might not have survived the night. Already its trunk moved with more intent, nudging the bowl, then reaching weakly toward its mother's front foot. The mother lowered her head, touched the calf once on the brow, and stood firm again. Miriam gathered the used clothes, folding them into her pack. The work was mostly done. What remained now was stillness, recovery, the quiet space between danger and safety. No one stood, no one spoke. The trust in the clearing was intact, and to break it with movement would be to forget what had held the mother in place on the road for so long. The matriarch shifted once more, then settled onto her knees beside the calf. It was rare to see such a gesture, a full-grown elephant folding her body so low, making herself small. But here, under the fig, in the fading heat, she rested. Not sleeping, not surrender, just presence. Above them, the sun slipped behind the high branches, casting the whole clearing in gold and green. The only sound was the breath of the calf, deeper now, slower, steadier. The clearing held still, and the weight of what had passed settled gently over the earth. The light had shifted by the time the calf stirred. Dusk settled in soft layers over the clearing, turning the dust beneath the fig tree to a dull bronze. Shadows stretched long across the ground. Insects moved lazily through the air. Miriam sat still, arms resting on her knees, watching the rise and fall of the calf's ribs. The hydration had taken hold. Its breaths had grown fuller. The small movements, once random twitches, now followed a rhythm. Purpose was returning. The mother had not left its side. She stood over him through the heat, through the slow hours of waiting. When he shifted now, his trunk brushing along her foreleg, she responded with a sound. A low, rolling rumble that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. It was not loud. It didn't need to be. It was a sound that meant welcome, reassurance, recognition. The calf stirred again, drawing his legs beneath him in a shaky fold. The muscles flexed, held, then released. He tried again. Miriam rose slightly, keeping her distance, her gaze fixed on the calf's posture. His ears fluttered once, then stilled. His front legs straightened first, followed by a long pause, then a tremble of the hindquarters. He swayed, too far to one side, then righted himself, and then, slowly, he stood. His frame wobbled under the weight, knees shaking like soft reeds in the wind. But he did not fall. The mother stepped closer, brushing her trunk along his spine. He let out a groan, not one of pain, but effort, and leaned lightly against her shoulder. The contact was brief. A moment later he took a step forward. One hoof settled, then the next. The ground beneath him held firm. From the tree line, Lekan signaled Miriam with a small gesture, a sweep of his hand across the far ridge. She followed his gaze. Shapes were forming in the low light, quiet and without sound. A line of gray moved along the horizon, broad and steady. The herd, 8, maybe 10. Their outlines were soft with distance but unmistakable. They stood just beyond the rise, facing the clearing, watching. The calf moved again, slower now, and paused after each step. His trunk reached down once to test the grass, then lifted toward the scent of his kind. The mother rumbled again, this time a bit deeper. Miriam knew the herd would have waited for a sign, a signal that all was well. This was that moment. The matriarch turned, not fully but enough to widen her stance, her body angled toward the ridge. She held still there, silently bridging the distance between recovery and return. From the hilltop, one of the herd moved first, a smaller female, likely a cousin or sibling. She came halfway down the slope and stopped. Then another followed. No sound passed between them, just movement, just knowing. The calf took 2 more steps, more confident now. His head lifted higher, ears rising. Miriam could see the rhythm returning to his walk, slow, uneven still, but real. He was moving again under his own strength. The tension that had held in the clearing all day began to shift. The stillness changed. Not broken, just lighter, less fragile. The mother waited until the calf reached her side again, then turned fully toward the slope. She didn't look back. The message was clear. It was time. Miriam took a quiet step backward, then another. Lekan did the same. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The calf was standing, and the herd had come. As the last of the sun dipped below the trees, the wind shifted just slightly, warm and dry, carrying with it the faint scent of dust, bark, and distant water. The calf let out a soft, uncertain call. From the ridge, the answering rumble came almost instantly, low and deep and steady. The herd was waiting, and the way home had opened. The calf stepped forward, slowly but without pause, each stride steadier than the last. The mother kept close to his side, her bulk a silent barrier against the edge of the clearing. Together they moved toward the open stretch beyond the fig tree, where the dry grass lifted gently in the breeze and the first stars blinked through the deepening blue. The herd waited just beyond the slope, still quiet, still still. No trumpet, no rush, only presence. Miriam stood back, her hands at her sides watching the figures merge with distance. The calf paused once near the base of the rise, swaying slightly. He turned his head and looked behind him. Not for long, not searching, just a glance. The kind of glance that holds something unspoken. Then he moved again, legs bending more easily now, trunk curled close to his chest. The mother gave one low rumble and the herd responded in kind, a chorus of breath through the grass. They reached the edge of the hill and began to ascend. Dust rose lightly behind their feet, catching the last color of the sky. At the crest, the calf slowed again, flanked now by 2 others who had stepped forward to receive him. The mother lifted her head, ears fanned wide, then without pause, the group turned east into the plain and began to walk. No one among them looked back again. The clearing fell silent. The bowl of the land held only the memory of movement now. Miriam exhaled slowly. Her boots pressed faint marks into the dirt as she stepped back toward the road, where the surface remained warm and flat beneath her feet. The canvas from the stretcher had been folded neatly and rested by the base of the tree, no longer needed. The saline was gone. The bowls were dry. She walked the length of the stretch where the matriarch had once stood, still, unwavering, unmoved by horn or heat or time. That same road was empty now. The dust had begun to settle, no longer disturbed by cautious steps or the shifting weight of breath. Miriam paused in the middle, right where the elephant had blocked them, the memory of her shape still fresh in the air. Behind her, Lekan stood at the tree line, his silhouette framed in dusk. Neither spoke. There was no need. What had happened here would not be written in a report, not fully, not the way the mother had waited, not the way the calf had answered her rumble, not the way the herd had returned at the exact moment it mattered most. These things didn't live on paper. They lived in the land. The road stretched wide now, pale under the rising moon, empty and open. The space the elephants once filled had not vanished. It had only passed forward, into the bush, into the quiet miles beyond where rangers don't follow and stories carry on without eyes to see them. But the silence that lingered here held a shape, and the breeze that moved across the tar still carried the scent of what had come through. Miriam turned once, looked out over the plain, and then began her slow walk back to the vehicle. There was no rush. The road would stay open now. The miracle had already passed, quiet as breath, sure as dust, and gone.